Have you ever thought about traveling solo? Whether you just don't have somebody to travel with or you need to get away for a little self reflection time from whatever's going on in your life. We're going to talk about how, why, and some of the different scenarios with solo travel coming up next. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Ryan, and if it's your first time here, welcome to the Millers in Motion podcast. What is Millers in Motion, you may ask? Well, that's my wife and I. We travel as much as we possibly can, and for the last 2.5 years, we've actually been living full-time in our Alliance Valor RV and traveling on cruises and other types of trips all around it. So, why are we talking about solo travel today? Obviously, it's my wife and I. We live in an RV. We travel together a lot, but there are some scenarios coming up that is requiring us to do a little bit of solo travel. Now, there's two different kinds of solo travel. There's traveling for business solo, and then there's traveling for pleasure solo. We're focusing on the pleasure because if you're going somewhere for business, that's a little different because you're going to get there. You have people you're going to work with. You have things that you have to do and or achieve. And so by doing that, there's inherently going to be something to do in community and less nervousness and all of those things associated with that as it is. Now, the flip side of that is why in the earth would someone want to travel solo? Well, there's the obvious, right? Flat out, you're by yourself. So, there's plenty of people in this world that either are just dating, haven't been married, whatever scenario that is the reason why that you would travel by yourself. And I think what's important to know is that, people get this anxiety with traveling solo, and I completely understand it. I had it the first couple of times I did it by myself. But, you don't want to completely disregard the fact that, if you like to travel, if you like to learn more about different cultures and integrate, that it's okay to be uncomfortable, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing to be nervous or uncomfortable. I mean, it can cause some anxiety, but, just know that depending on the scenario, and I think you can build up to a different types of solo trips. So obviously, what are we going to be talking about solo trips? So because we are so heavily immersed in the RV world, there's obviously solo RVing. Then in addition to that, you have the typical trip, right? I'm just going to get on a plane, go somewhere for X amount of days, and then I'm going to come back. And there's even different, variations of that, which we'll get into in a little more detail in a second. And then you have like cruises and other types of things and group travel, even though you're riding solo. So we're going to start kind of in chronological order, or whatever the easiest would be. Now, the easiest thing would be is to join like a group of people that are traveling, even though you might be going by yourself. So the easiest way I can explain this is, for instance, we're doing a group trip with our friends Phil and Stacy from Today is Someday, and it's not like you could, like, if it was just going to be me, I would still go, but you have that group atmosphere already inherently built in. So that's the easiest version of solo travel. So you're really not, minus getting to the destination and getting home, wherever that may be. In this scenario, we're doing a cruise and we're both going, and this is later on in the year, in 2025, actually in March. And, if I was going to go by myself on something like that, this would be where I would start, because there's already a group of like-minded people that you may know some of them, you may not know some of them, but, you can meet some people quickly, easily, integrate into the culture of the trip very, very fast. So from there, I would actually put probably like either a Disney trip, if you're into that kind of thing, or a cruise as next, because inherently there are so many like-minded people on those two types of things, and both do a pretty good job of helping solo travelers integrate together a little bit. So after that, then I'd probably put RVing just slightly behind that. And I say just a general RV trip. Now, you can go to a rally or an in-person event or an RV show and get a little bit more of that group So I'm kind of using a wide spreading compass here. If you're going somewhere to see sights and all that stuff, a lot of times in the RV community, just, hanging out outside, meeting people at the campground, all of those kind of things, especially if you're going to be somewhere for a little bit more time, can be a great way to meet some people, and then who knows, maybe go on an adventure with some of them as you go through that. So from there, obviously, the hardest to do is if you're just going to go somewhere for a long weekend, like you want to visit New Orleans or Paris. It doesn't matter where. It's obviously you're going to have a harder time integrating, and that's where, start with the hotel kind of a thing and chat with like a concierge or something and figure out where people like to go, and then maybe find a bar if you're a drinker. If you're a non-drinker, you just kind of hang out and just ask some people, right? Take an Uber somewhere, go experience something, but then talk with people. And I think the important part about kind of learning more about different cultures and getting into it, and this is where a lot of people's anxiety likes to flare up, is just have a conversation with a local, assuming you can speak their language and or they can speak English, that kind of a thing. Obviously, if you're in France and the person doesn't speak English and you don't speak French, there's a whole different level of complexity there. But, if you're in New Orleans, then try and go meet some people. Kind of, in the age of social media, there's two different ways you can go about doing this. Now, one is the old school way. You can go to bars, you can go to restaurants, you can go out where people are in more of a social environment. And from there, you can meet some people, do some things, and then potentially by mid or the end of the trip, you've kind of met some friends that you can get to know in that area before you head back home. Now, you flip that around, and in the age of social media, there are plenty of groups that are solo travelers that are, in a specific area, on a specific cruise, all that kind of stuff, where all of a sudden you can have a little bit more integration prior to going and kind of start building those relationships before you ever step foot on whatever it happened to be that trip, and have a little bit of a game plan, if that makes sense. So planning that perfect solo trip, what's popular and where to start. I would tell you to start with cruises. If you're a fan of Disney and or Universal, those are also pretty easy to integrate places. From the cruise perspective, a lot of the cruise lines are doing, they're actually catering to solo travelers. Now, the one thing I have to tell you from a booking perspective, a lot of cruise lines will do what's called a second supplement. So they assume every room is going to have two people on it. So if you're looking at if you haven't changed the search criteria to one person and you're looking at a price of a cruise, you're probably going to have to double that dollar amount that's on there. So if it says starting at $499, it's probably going to be, $1,000. If it's $500, you're going to be at $1,000. Now, there are some cruise lines that do a better job of this. I have found Norwegian is probably the best, where they have a very, very, very discounted, what they call second supplement. Royal Caribbean, depending on the cruise, is pretty good about it. The worst are going to be Disney, Holland America, Princess. They're going to make you pay that full second person. So, there's some pros and cons to that depending on how you're doing it. And also, this is a little insert here moment. I am actually going to be doing a solo cruise in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I'm guessing a little bit there. But in about 3 weeks, at the beginning of December, I'm going to be doing a solo cruise. Lauren can't go. Quite frankly, we need to get some content built in because we have some fun things happening in early 2025. But some of them require a little bit of lead time, and so going to get some content on a solo cruise. Plus, I've never done that before, and I want to be able to speak to it. I've done Disney solo a couple of times. It's been slightly integrated with the work trip, but I'm looking for feedback. So we have 3 ports of call, and I also want to know, what questions do you have about solo cruising? What, I'm going to let you guys pick what I do in some of these ports. And so the 3 ports, I'm leaving from Miami, and so I'm not really going to do anything in Miami besides get to the ship, get off the ship, and then fly in and out. But I'm going to be in Nassau, Bahamas, which I think I have a game plan, but if there's something specifically that anybody out there would like to know more about, whether it be through the podcast or the main videos, by all means, shoot us an email. Also, Key West is one of the other ones. And so I'm excited about Key West. Lauren and I have been there before, so I kind of have an idea, some stuff I'd like to go do. But if there's something you guys would like to see in the videos, by all means, reach out. And then last but not least, Great Stirrup Cay. That is actually Norwegian's private island. So that one we're probably just going to go experience whatever there is to do on the island, because I'm not even 100% sure what I've gotten into on that one. And then we're coming back. So then there's a couple of at-sea days. So if you have questions about solo cruising, specifically on Norwegian or anything else, we're on the Norwegian Pearl, or Norwegian Jade. I'm sorry. We're on Norwegian Jade. That, you can reach out to us and you can shoot us an email, info@millersinmotion, or you can follow us on any other socials, Instagram, Facebook. It's just @millers_in_motion, or just search Millers in Motion, and our little logo icon, our faces will pop up, and it's the same across all platforms. So shoot us an email, send us a message. I would love to know any places you'd like us to experience and share on the channel, or if you've just got some good food recommendations and that kind of stuff in Key West or Nassau, and then Great Stirrup Cay. If you've ever been, let us know. I'm curious about that because I don't have no clue what I've been into. So getting back to kind of planning the rest of that trip, being able to be on a cruise ship and kind of have that integrated where you can go to a nightlife party if you want to. I know on Norwegian what they do is they have like a 5 or 5 o'clock kind of cocktail hour for solos. And then after that, the idea is that you can meet some people. And then if you want to go to dinner with them, you can, because dinner is like right after that first hour. And so, there's a lot of things that they do to integrate people so that you can try to meet fellow solo travelers, however you want to do that. So again, follow the YouTube channel and we'll show you how we kind of go about doing all that. I'm sure I'll talk about it post here on the podcast as well. Disney, I know that there's a solo traveler for Disney Facebook page. There's a lot of Facebook pages for things these days, so you can definitely check those out as well. The thing about some of the tips I have, like when you're eating at different places, like as a solo person, especially at like a Disney, it feels a little weird sitting at a table for like 2 or 4 by yourself. Now, it's really weird for us because I always have a camera across from me, so I get double the weird looks. But one of the things I like to do is actually sit at the bar. People typically sitting on the bar are a little more open to conversations. It's a little more cohesive you have a little more of the ability, just kind of how a bar is set up, versus sitting at a table, and having a conversation with someone on a different table. When you're at a table, you're very kind of inclusive to that table. When you're at a bar, it's a little easier to have that conversation. And most places have the exact same menu at the bar. So it's not like you have to go there to drink. You can sit there and have a meal. I would tell you that if you're going to sit at a bar, do something. Don't just sit there, right, and drink water all night. Get a drink, get some food, whatever, and hang out, relax, enjoy it. And on top of that, talk to maybe the bartender start off with, and then you never know. Get outside that comfort zone. So many people with social media now kind of close down in those situations. And I see it a lot with the younger generation. They just don't know how to start a conversation anymore. And so there is a little bit of an art form to it, and I'm having to go back 20 years to when I used to do it. But, that is one way you can do it as well. And when you're in a place like a Disney or a cruise, there's already people around you that are like-minded, right? Now, if you go to New Orleans, you don't know if they're a local, if they're on vacation. You have no idea. So I would say start solo travel in some of those, more condensed, people have the same views, not necessarily views, are there for the same reason. Like Disney, people are there to enjoy Disney. On a cruise, people picked it because of the ports of call, or they like cruising, or whatever. Those are very like-minded, heavy scenarios versus just going out somewhere and jumping on a trip. So, it's hard to not talk about kind of some of the budgeting. We've already talked a little bit about, on cruises, but, in hotels and airfare, one of the bonuses by traveling yourself is it is cheaper, and you can kind of do it how you want. Like when Lauren and I travel, like we're planning a couple of different trips right now, and we're going back and forth. We're having the conversation of, well, I'd rather do it this way, and she'd rather do it that way. So like I may say, well, I'd rather fly first class with a connection. She'd rather fly coach and be direct, just because of how everything falls and lands. So for us to make a decision, there is a give and take, just like everything else in this world when you're married or with someone, is because I want her to be happy, I also want to be happy, and we find what works the best in the middle and we go forward. So neither of us are 100% getting our way, but at the same time too, we are getting to experience all those things together. So it has its pros and its cons. When you travel solo, like for instance, when I've gone down to Disney for a work trip, and I say a work trip at Disney, Orlando, but I'll go visit the parks for a day or two, like in the afternoons, because I would normally do my morning stuff at a conference, and then I would be able to have the afternoons to myself. At the end of the day, I do whatever I want. And while I love Lauren, and I would never trade experiencing anything with her for me getting to do it my way, when she physically can't go or be there, at the end of the day, I get to eat what I want, again, within reason. The what I want versus what I should eat comes into play. But I also have the ability to do the things I want. Like, I'm not a big, she doesn't like going on Tower of Terror at Hollywood Studios. I love going on Tower of Terror. So when we're there together, we typically don't do that ride because she doesn't want to. And that's perfectly fine. We move on. We find something else to do. But when she's not there, I go on the stuff she doesn't want to go on. The flip side of that too is I'm a bigger guy. I don't necessarily fit or very comfortable on a lot of roller coasters. So if she was there, I know she would be going on more roller coasters than I can go. In addition to that, I've had a handful of concussions playing football in my younger days. And so, I can't ride every roller coaster because I'm scared I'm going to black out. So I know that if she was there without me, she would do things a little differently as well. Plus, at the end of the day, we have different tastes. She's going to go for salads and that kind of thing. I love a good hamburger, steak, pretty much red meat. Not that we can't integrate both across. The other thing too is I have a tendency to go a little later in the night. She doesn't. And so, being able to do something solo versus that isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. And there's a benefit of this, even if you're in a relationship or not, is it's always good to kind of self-reflect and be able to function as an individual sometimes. I think we become so self-reliant on our partners that we forget how to function by ourselves, and this requires you to do that. Now, as much as and I say this full disclosure, she helps even when I'm gone, because we can't take care of the dogs by ourselves. There's a lot of things we can't do without the other person, even when we're not there. So I help her with booking reservations and those types of things. She helps me by taking care of the dogs and all that other stuff when I'm gone. So now that being said, some logistics, talking about accommodations, transportation, there's nothing really special about booking that kind of stuff, except for the fact that, hotels are going to be about the same price. There's no discount magically. But obviously airfare, you have to be a little bit more open. Like, I have a tendency to fly more premium economy and first class when I go solo. And it's not because I don't want Lauren too, but again, being a bigger guy, when we're in economy together or flying Southwest, for instance, we don't mind snuggling up to each other, especially on shorter flights, as long as we can keep it cool enough and I don't sweat her out, but we typically will get close anyway. And so that doesn't bother us when we're traveling. Whereas I don't want to get to know this random person, am I right, that well. So I will typically fly premium economy or up in first class when it is solo. Packing, that's the other thing too, is like a lot of times I don't pack as much as Lauren does typically. Now it ends up being close to the same size worth of stuff because my clothes are inherently bigger than Lauren's. She's quite a bit smaller than me. But there's a lot of times where we'll throw stuff in the other person's bag, just like, oh crap, I forgot that. Can you have room for, my pills or my deodorant, or I forgot this. Oops, you mind if I throw it in your bag? And there's sure, why not? When you're traveling solo, it's all you, and that goes for when you're traveling through airports and securities and whatever you happen to be traveling on, you have to be self-sufficient. You cannot rely on help at that point. And so, how you pack changes some things, and how you kind of move your luggage around. You have to be coherent that, like with Lauren, I'll typically take one of her bags. This is assuming we're not filming, or if we are filming, she might take my bag so that I can get a shot a little bit easier. If it's one of those situations where, we're going on a cruise, like I'm really curious, and you have to stay tuned for late March into April for the series, but we're going to do a cruise series. Like I said earlier, in March, we're going to be gone for like 9 days. We don't travel light, especially on cruises, because on cruises we typically have what we'll wear during the day, and then we clean up and put something a little nicer on for the evenings. Well, it's a 7-night cruise. We'll be in LA for a couple of days, and then getting back. I don't know how packing's going to work, because we're going to have a lot of stuff, and so I don't know how much I'm going to be able to film whilst moving luggage from one place to the other, because I'm pretty sure we're gonna have at least 3 bags that we're gonna have to check. Plus, she'll inherently have her purse or some sort of a bag, like a satchel. I will also have my camera bag. And so, being able to film and move kind of that stuff, we've had to improvise along the way, or stop, film what we need to film, and then keep moving kind of a thing, because it's so difficult. Now, one of the big things, and this is what I hear most from people when they say, well, my biggest concern with traveling solo is safety. There's some generic safety stuff, and we talk about this a lot with the RV stuff, and that's if you feel uneasy with a boondocking spot or maybe a slightly questionable campground, the best security system when you're doing that is your gut. Well, that's kind of the same thing when you're solo traveling. Like, if something feels uneasy, change the situation, right? Get out of that particular area, hotel, whatever the situation may be, change it. Because at the end of the day, your gut's probably the best security you have. But also be super aware. Like, again, this comes back to the younger generation. I've noticed that they're less aware of what's going on around them, whereas I'm very aware. I'm that guy that likes to sit in the corner of restaurants and be able to see the doors and all the exits and know where they are. And I don't know why. I just always have been. Some of that's because I'm being protective of my family or the people that are with us. But it also has a lot to do with that I have a better understanding of my surroundings when I'm in a corner and I can see the entire facility, kind of a thing, versus, having my back to the door right near the entrance. That's my biggest pet peeve. I hate tables that end up like that in restaurants. So, just be aware of your surroundings, and book things at correct times. Like, booking a 6 a.m. flight and knowing you're going to have to go park in a parking garage or a parking lot at 5 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever time you need to get to the airport, is setting yourself up for potentially a bad situation. So in your planning phases, you can think through that stuff, like just take the later flight, assuming you can. Now, if you can't, you can't. But then it comes back to parking in the correct places, right? Like, pay for a lot that's monitored. So like for us, I always use the parking spot. And I will, the nice thing about that is typically the shuttle van at that hour will follow you to wherever you park and then help you get your bags out. And so that's another one of those scenarios where instead of parking, at an airport in the back of a parking garage where there's no assistance, I'm parking off site with a shuttle, but there's someone there to help. Now, that's not as big of a deal to me because at 6'2", 275, I'm a bigger guy. People have a tendency not to mess with me. But if you're maybe female or smaller, maybe that's an actual concern. So it comes back to kind of making the correct planning and then make smart choices along the way. Like, understand where you're going, do your research before you actually leave. Like, make sure you have things. It's funny because I was talking to a couple in the airport leaving for Dallas. Actually, they were on the shuttle as we were leaving Dallas and going up to Wisconsin a few weeks ago. And they were talking about they didn't know 100% where they were staying when they were going to Cabo because her boss had a home, and that's where they were staying. Well, when you go into another country, understand what you're going to need. They didn't know they needed to actually have the address of that. Otherwise, their tourist visa is going to get denied at the border. Now, you can travel between, you can enter the Mexico just from the U.S., just on a U.S. passport, right? But you still have to fill out your forms and declarations. And one of those things is, where are you staying? When are you returning to the U.S., right? And so most people, it's a long weekend, a week, that kind of 10 days max, 10, 12 days max. But, you need to know the address and or the hotel name. Or if it's a villa, you need to know the address, that kind of a thing. And so they actually started trying to figure that out right then and there and did. Otherwise, they're going to get to Mexico and not know, they're not going to be able to put something on that form, and they're going to be denied entry until they can fill that out. Then you end up in purgatory, just like Tom Hanks in that movie, The Terminal. You're just stuck there for a little bit. I mean, you're going to get the information, but now does your phone work in Mexico? Well, ours does, but not everybody's may. Do you actually have a connection? Do you have the ability to have a connection? That kind of stuff. So just if you're a solo, kind of look through those things and understand the requirements if you're traveling internationally. If you're on a cruise, make sure you have the proper documentation, whether it's digital or physical. Make sure you have your boarding pass for your airlines. All the basic stuff that goes without saying on travel. But with a solo, because there's so much other anxiety, you really want to make sure all that stuff is kind of all your ducks in a row and all of those things. Maybe have some emergency preparedness just in case. So like for instance, this cruise I'm going on without Lauren, I already have the emergency phone number for the ship. So if something were to happen back home and Lauren absolutely had to get a hold of me, she has a phone number she can call. I'll let her know my stateroom as soon as I know it. And then that way there can be a situation where I can still get a hold of her. Now I'll have an internet package, which I'm adding once I get there. That'll be on my computer because I'll need to be able to kind of do a few things. And then I'll talk to Lauren at least probably once a day, but I'll have to FaceTime her from my computer. Because if you've ever been on a cruise ship, the way Norwegian works, it's based on time. Well, if I turn it on my phone, my phone's going to constantly want to use the internet, and so it's going to burn through it really fast. Whereas my laptop, I can just turn it off, and I know it's not using it, right? So I know I'll have so many internet hours, and I'll just be able to use the computer to call Lauren and or text message, that kind of a thing. So from there, kind of talking through, making friends and socializing on the road. Like we talked about, use social apps, find meetup events, take group tours, that kind of stuff. A lot of challenges you're going to overcome, anxiety being a big one, is when you get to where you're going, you're going to kind of want to, I call it being a hermit. You want to just stay in the room and stay capped because you get a little bit too anxious about going out and meeting people. And that's where you kind of have to have that drive to step past that, if that makes any sense, and get outside, even if you just go wander around and those kinds of things. So you have to kind of embrace that alone time and know how to deal with it, like eating, like we talked about earlier, being able to have a meal and those types of things. But look at Facebook. There might be some group things. Group travel is another one. Like Viator is a great use of its tours, no matter where you are. And you might be able to find a group tour to go on. And who knows, maybe you made friends with some of the people on the tour. So you can put yourself in the right scenario of being able to maximize and see things and meet people. And who knows, maybe you'll even integrate into the culture a little bit and learn more about why people live there, some of the, whether it be religious or cultural exchanges in that area, and then learn more. Ultimately, that's why Lauren and I travel, is we like to embrace, local cultures, food, all of that kind of stuff. So the rewards of solo travel, right? So it can be very rewarding because if you can step outside that comfort zone and be okay with being a little uncomfortable, if you may, for that kind of a thing, it's great, but you are going to have to step outside that comfort zone. So have you ever traveled solo? Are you considering traveling solo? Or if you just want to give us a tip on that cruise to Key West, Nassau, and Norwegian's private island, we would love to hear from you. You can shoot us an email at info@millersinmotion, or you can go to the website or any of our social media and shoot us a message through those as well. If you're thinking about doing a solo trip and you decide to do it, we would love for you to share your pictures with us, tag us, and by all means, ask us any questions you might have coming up. Thank you guys so much for joining, and don't forget, get out there and enjoy the world. We'll see you next week.